I think that you need to be very careful about diagnosing someone as having a certain type of personality disorder versus a person with a certain type of attachment style. Because once you see that someone has a personality disorder, that's something that's going to take a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy or even medication in order to get them to function normally in relationships. But the strategies that work with attachment patterns do not work the same way with personality disorders. And timing here is very key. You want to make sure that you don't allow them to reflect or to feel like they're being rejected for too long. There has been an influx of people wanting to reconnect with someone who has a disorganized attachment style, also known as a fearful avoidant. And I guess we're just giving up on dismissive avoidance now, right? But I think it's great, though. I think it's great trying to recover a relationship instead of jumping into a rebound relationship or trying to browse the dating apps. I think that's absolutely great. But I feel the reason that people struggle to move on from fearful avoidance is really simple. The connection feels real. And when it ends, you're left trying to understand how something that felt so genuine suddenly becomes so unstable. The connection in the beginning of that can feel incredibly deep, right? If you've ever been in a relationship or if you are someone that's a fearful avoidant, I am, you know that the connection is usually deep because fearful avoidance can open up in ways that make relationship feel genuine and emotionally intense. You feel like you're seeing parts of them that other people don't really get to see. But the problem is this, at the same time, that closeness that creates that bond eventually activates their fear system. Because as emotional intimacy increases, their nervous system starts to interpret the relationship as something that's too overwhelming. And that's when that push-pull dynamic starts to begin. They move towards you emotionally, and then they pull away. They open up, and then they shut down. And a lot of this happens because fearful avoidants often feel overwhelmed by their own emotions. I know I can sometimes. Creating distance becomes a way for us to calm our nervous systems. And once distance is created, that's when we start to ruminate on what happened in that relationship and how we could have shown up better. We start replaying conversations, start thinking about the connection that we have with that person, and really think about what the relationship meant. And this is one of the reasons people stay emotionally hooked in this type of dynamic, because when a relationship is good, it can feel very real. I am so happy that I was able to understand this about myself and start to really challenge myself when things felt a little bit too overwhelming. I had this internal conflict that really craved that closeness, but for some reason, those relationships that felt the safest felt like the most unstable. What that means is whenever fearful avoidants get into relationships that feel safe and there's not a lot of chaos, for me, the chaos was my neighborhood. I had a really nurturing and supporting mom, but she was the only one. She was a single mom. But for me, I was kind of raised by the neighborhood, and the neighborhood that I grew up in wasn't very safe. There was a lot of bullying going on. There was a lot of, drugs in the community. I had unhealthy role models. And because of that, I believe that it led to a lot of the anxiety and the turmoil that I feel in relationships, because I've had really unhealthy relationships in those environments also. They were very volatile. And as I was able to really dive deep into my own personal history, it made me start to think about other avenues. And one avenue that I've seen is there has been a growing overlap between individuals with disorganized attachment and certain types of cluster B personalities. And if you guys aren't familiar with cluster B personalities are the cluster of personalities that include things like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, antisocial, histrionic, all those different personality disorders. And that really started to concern me as I started coaching people over the years. I think that you need to be very careful about diagnosing someone as having a certain type of personality disorder versus a person with a certain type of attachment style. Because once you see that someone has a personality disorder, that's something that's going to take a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy or even medication in order to get them to function normally in relationships. But if you see someone who doesn't have that, and they've been scanned or whatever they've taken testing to see if that's something that's ruled out, then you can work with someone who has an insecure attachment style. So what I'm saying is not everyone who has a fearful avoidant attachment style has one of these personality disorders, but there are strong overlaps, and the overlaps can look very similar. So if someone is thinking about reconnecting with a fearful avoidant, it's important for you to rule out the personality dynamics first, because the strategies that work with attachment patterns do not work the same way with personality disorders. All right. I want you to know that. Now, when it comes to breakups and fearful avoidance, the sequence usually looks like this: creates relief before the reflection. And the relief doesn't mean that they don't care about you in this relationship. It means the emotional pressure they were feeling in the relationship is suddenly gone. And that's key, because once that pressure disappears, the reflection starts to begin. The ruminating starts to begin. The reactivating starts to begin, because fearful avoidance can get triggered into the dismissive avoidance side. And that's when they start to deactivate. So when they feel emotionally cornered or pressured, their instinct is to create even more distance from you. So it's important that you do not chase after a fearful avoidant after they have started to deactivate. And timing here is very key. If you reach out too soon, they're going to feel too pressured. You wait too long, they're going to feel as if you've already given up on them, like everyone else in their lives. And this is something that I've talked about over and over again. The healthy balance here, as far as time, it needs to be about 2 to 3 weeks. That is the sweet spot that I've seen when it comes to reconnecting with a fearful avoidant, especially if it's someone that you've been in a relationship for a long time, someone that you've probably over time have picked up on these type of ways that they navigate when you guys have conflict, or when they're just feeling too overwhelmed, because they struggle to compartmentalize things that happen inside your relationship and outside of your relationship. If they're feeling stressed in their work, just like dismissive avoidance, they will be stressed all across the board. And for a good amount of them, it's hard for them to understand why they're feeling the way that they are and why they're starting to pull away from your relationship. So I want to thank you guys for stopping by the channel. I hope this information was valuable. Please feel free to subscribe. And if you want my help personally, that link is in the description. Thank you guys. And always remember, when you go and be loved, you'll never have to find it. God bless.